The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Golden Shovel Agency's series. You're seeing the speaker today for the month of July at the very end. So you guys are in for a real treat today. My name is Aaron Bressois. I'm CEO of Golden Shovel Agency. And just a couple notes before I introduce our speaker. All of the attendees are in listen-only mode, so you can feel free to type questions over in the control panel on the right side during the presentation. And at the end of Michelle's presentation, we will ask those questions and get further discussion. So feel free to put those in there. The other thing I'll note is that we are going to be recording the webinar, and the slides are available. So if you like what you see and would like to get copies of that, feel free to contact us. You can email Victor Perez, and his email is vperez, P-E-R-E-Z, at goldenshovelagency.com, or you can connect with support at goldenshovelagency.com, and we'll get you copies of those to share. So, nothing more to do. Let me introduce our speaker. The presentation today is how to increase your success securing grants, which is an excellent topic. Grant funding can play a significant role in project feasibility. Securing grant funding can be a bit tricky at times, but in this session, you will learn tips on how to find available grants, how to cultivate relationships with funders, and how to create a dream proposal that a program officer can hold up as a model for other grant seekers to emulate, rather than an application that needs explanation. And presenting today is Michelle Landsverk. She's president of Landsverk and Associates Incorporated that works with businesses, organizations, and communities. Michelle has worked in the nonprofit and economic development arena for 15 years and has helped numerous organizations with the process of project design, aligning partners, and successfully securing federal, state, and private grant funding for their projects. Welcome, Michelle, and thank you for a webinar series today.
Well, thank you, Aaron. It's my pleasure to be here and to share with some of your clients and listeners today some of the best that I have discovered over the last several years. Now my screen isn't forwarding. There we go. Okay. So as Aaron mentioned, I've had a consulting business since 2005. I'm president of Landsverk and Associates, and done a lot of grant writing over the years. And there are some things that I've learned that I will share with you. Now, this is a pretty big topic, and we have a fairly limited amount of time today, so I won't be able to get real in-depth on specific types of grants. And hopefully if you have some specific questions, we can address those in the Q&A session. So these are going to be some generally accepted best practices. So when we talk about securing grants, you see here the picture of the guy with the handout and the other person with the cash in their hand. What we're really talking about in most basic terms, what you need to do is you need to convince an organization that they should pay for your project or support your organization. So why would an organization fund your project? There's three basic reasons why an organization might give you money. First, and this is most important, I cannot stress this enough, your project aligns with their funding priorities. Every funder has funding priorities, and they try to communicate those, and sometimes it's our job to unravel what those funding priorities are. Sometimes there's some between things that we need to uncover. But aligning with the funding priorities is extremely important. Second, you need to convince them that you are capable of carrying out that project. So, does your organization have a good track record? Do you have the capacity to do what you're proposing? Or are you being too ambitious with what you're proposing? That is also very important. Third, you need to convince them that they will be glad that they provided the funding 2 to 3 years down the road. So they really become your partner in this project. They're kind of behind the scenes. They've provided the funding, But they have stakeholders too. They have a board of directors, they maybe have donors, others that have provided them money that they have to provide reports and accounting to. And so they want to be proud of you and your accomplishments. So you need to convince them up front that in fact they will be proud down the road. So best practice number one, find funding that aligns with your project. You know your project is great, but no matter how well written your application is, if it doesn't align with a grantor's funding priorities, it is unlikely to receive funding. And I've just seen this again and again and again. We all tend to become very enthralled with our own projects and our own organizations. We're very close to the people and the situations, and we're our own best fans, biggest fans. And sometimes we tend to just think everyone else should be able to understand how great our project is. And even if, you know, the fit isn't great, we think sometimes that we can convince a funder that they should in fact fund. But the fit with the funder's priorities is extremely important. So the first thing to do is do your research. Read everything you can about that funding program, about the organization, and within each organization there are different probably funding programs. So we're very fortunate that we live in the age that we do, where we can find so much online. So at an organization's website you'll probably find frequently asked questions, you'll find funding guidelines, information about the application process, and so on. Pay attention also to what and who else they have funded over the last few years. Sometimes you can learn more about reading other funded projects than you can learn from the funding guidelines. Sometimes the funding guidelines uses certain language or phrases, and what the funder means by those words and phrases might be different than your interpretation of them. So when you look at the other projects that have been funded, it sometimes becomes much more clear what they're really interested in funding. Another thing that's good to know is what size is their average grant. So if you need $100,000 to do your project and you look and see the other things that they funded, and most of them are in the neighborhood of $5,000 to $10,000, if you request $100,000, you're not going to get it. So it's important to know what size their average grant is. So when we look at finding grants, there are different types of grants. So if you're looking for funding from a private foundation, you can start with a simple Google search, and you can find a lot that way. Another thing is an organization that does seem to align with your organization or project. You can follow them on Twitter if you've got a Twitter account, and they're pretty good about tweeting out those opportunities. So that can be a good way for you to kind of get a heads up on an opportunity coming right very quickly. One source that I use is the Foundation Directory Online, and I've got the URL here, fdo.foundationcenter.org. I think there's a free subscription, but with the paid subscription you get a little bit more ability to do more searches and find more information. But it gives you a really in-depth look at basically every foundation that's out there. If you are in the process of kind of building a database of potential funders, you could just subscribe for 1 month and just pull down all the different organizations that might pertain to your project or organization. One of the things I like about the Foundation Directory Online is you can put in keywords specific. So let's say you've got something you're doing with kids, you can put in children, you can put in parks, you can, if it's serving a lower income, you can put in low income. So you can put in all those keyword phrases and it will pull all of the private foundations that have a fit with those particular keywords. So it is a very useful tool. Then in terms of government grants, we have county, state, and federal. And I'll talk a little bit more about the government. So understanding government funding. You know, Washington, D.C. is really a funding epicenter. Congress allocates funding amounts and they establish priorities for different programs throughout the United States. Some is awarded through federal programs. So in that case, it would be a federal application process. Some is awarded to states who then re-grant the money. Now, for the state funding, you want to bookmark your state's webpage that lists grant opportunities. So I would just encourage you, become an expert on what your state funds, especially pertaining to your area. Sign up for email grant notices. Most states have notices that are online e-newsletters that they send out. State funding is competitive, but it is less so than federal. Federal is going to be obviously the most competitive. So learning and accessing and becoming an expert, understanding what your state funds is very important. Then in terms of federal funding, familiarize yourself with agencies that are relevant to your work. So if you're in economic development, you're going to be looking at the Department of Commerce, the Economic Development Administration, for sure those two, the Small Business Administration. Some of these agencies would have funding for economic development. Bookmark grants.gov on your browser, sign up for email notices. I'll warn you, if you haven't signed up for grants.gov, you will receive notices. I think I get an email every single day with all the postings. And I just basically cruise through them pretty quick, and I know the programs that are of interest to me and my clients, and I just kind of hone in on those. But I do find them that way, and so I do find that to be very useful. So moving on, best practice number 2, relationships matter. Yes, you're probably with an organization and you're looking at requesting funding from another organization or agency. But even so, it is about people. So, get to know each other. And it begins with the first conversation. It continues with the grant application and grant review. And of course, these are generalities. Every program and organization is different. So these tips don't apply to every single one, but generally so they do. Project evaluation and post-project, post-funded communication are critical, whether or not the project achieves its goals. So if your project is successful, the funder wants to share in that accomplishment. If it's not successful, the funder wants to learn about what did not work. Obviously, if they've set certain funding priorities and you convince them that you aligned with those priorities and you had a great project and you followed the plan, but it wasn't successful, they want to learn about that so that they don't continue to they might even adjust their priorities, or they might award funding differently. So they want to know even about the failures. Accountability is really the key word. If a funder has given you money, you are accountable to explain your success or your failure. Did you follow the plan that you put forth in your proposal? If you didn't, you'll want to explain any deviations from the plan and the effect of those changes. And let's face it, life is crazy and things happen, and sometimes critical staff people can become ill. If this is a community project, something can happen in the community that changes things, and so you're not able to carry things out the way that you were. A funder, if you did your best, a funder isn't going to count it against you in the future if in fact you did do your best and you were accountable and you explain why those deviations occurred. Another thing, if the organization welcomes inquiries, contact them to talk about your project. So that would be a good starting point. Contact them via their preferred method, maybe phone or email. Now, I have to add that some of them don't want to be contacted, and if you do not see any means to contact them on their website, they probably don't get contacted. However, those tend to be the smaller grants. Usually those that are, you know, a little bit larger, more dollars involved, they do welcome some type of contact. And most of them will take a phone call, even at the federal level. So I do think a conversation is a good thing. Ask them for their specific guidelines, and if they think your project is something they would consider funding. Even though you've looked, but make sure that you've read the guidelines before you call, so you've got, you know, some understanding before you contact them. But it doesn't hurt to let them verbalize that on the phone, because sometimes that helps to give those subtle shadings of meanings that might not be so clear, helping you to read between the lines. The fourth thing here is if the program officer is willing to pre-review and provide feedback on your application, that is absolute gold to you. That is so valuable. So if the program officer is willing to pre-review, absolutely, they're going to help you actually write a winning proposal. Well, they won't write it for you, obviously, but they'll help you identify weak areas or areas that should be revised. So moving on, best practice number 3, and you see the picture here, get organized. You need a plan. Writing a grant is complicated, and it doesn't just happen, so you want to be organized in your approach. First thing, make a list of the required documents. What are you going to need to pull this whole thing together? This seems pretty basic, but you know, it's important. Assign responsibilities for various tasks. So who's going to financials together? Who's going to write the narrative? Who's going to contact people for letters of support? And so forth. Establish a timeline for getting everything done, working backwards from the due date. So if you've got an August 30th due date, how long is it going to take you to get that narrative done? How long is it going to take you to get the financials pulled together? So get that timeline working backwards from the due date. Here's just an extra note. Avoid working in isolation. And I know probably some of you on the webinar today have probably been assigned, hey Sue, you're going to write this grant. That's your job. Get it done. And you're working on it alone. That's tough. That's a tough situation to be in. You know, we all have heard the phrase, 2 minds are better than 1. And it's certainly relevant in this case. So even backing up, not only just the writing of the grant, but the project design and the development of the project that you're putting forth. Projects that have buy-in and ownership from a larger group are more powerful, and they're more likely to be successful. So to the extent you can, try to involve other people with you in this process. It will be more successful. And just a lot of the time, the way I work, if I'm working for a client, we'll bat something back and forth several times. You know, there'll be a draft, and then they'll review it, and we'll go back and forth, and it just kind of, as it tumbles back and forth, it just keeps getting polished further and further. So, and it really needs to go through that process. I sometimes liken the grant writing process to cooking. For those of you that cook, and if you've ever made a good sauce, you start with a pot full of stuff, and you just kind of keep boiling it down and boiling it down till it gets really flavorful. And I think grant writing is a lot that way. You have to start with a lot of the raw elements, and you just have to kind of keep boiling it down and boiling it down till you distill those very strong points. Best practice number 4, give yourself enough time. If you're going to be too rushed, you will not set yourself up for success. But, you know, saying that, I know that we've all probably been put in situations where somebody says, hey, here's this grant, I just found out about it. It's got to be done 1 week from today. Well, there might be some you can pull together that quickly, but some that it's just impossible. like a federal grant or even a state grant. A lot of times there's too many documents and things to pull together that quickly. But give yourself enough time. Now, most grants have some sort of deadline, and this can be a positive or negative. Obviously, the positive thing is it makes you get it done on time. But the negative is you've got to get it done by that date. Some of the private foundations have a rolling deadline. So it might be, you know, they'll just review grants as they come in and as they have money. Not all do that. Some of them have also deadlines. They can be annual, they could be quarterly, they could be monthly. If there is no deadline, one of the negative things is sometimes you just tend to push it off. So deadlines are something that I both love and hate. If you took time to create a plan for the process like we just talked about, getting things done on time will be easier. So the more organized you are, the better you'll be able to manage your time. Pay special attention to items that require a third party to do something. So if you need a letter of support or cost estimate from a third party and you've got to get it by that deadline, but you're only, you know, you're asking for the letter of support 2 days before your deadline, you're really putting that person in a hard spot and you're not setting yourself up for success. You might not get all the letters in that you need. So pay special attention to those items and make sure that you allow those people enough time. Try to get the narrative pulled together a week in advance, at least. I think that's very beneficial. So you can do best practice number 5, have someone else review it. Another set of eyes is very valuable. When you've been working on a narrative and an application, you are very close to the project and you're really too close to be objective. A fresh set of eyes will see things that you may have missed. They also will see things that maybe weren't clearly expressed. You might think it's clear, but you have in-depth knowledge of the organization, the way it works, and so forth. So, you know, someone that's outside or not working as closely with the project or the organization will be able to see those things that aren't clear. If you get the narrative done ahead of time, a week ahead or more, it will allow time for someone else not only to proof it, but to review it and get back to you with comments that you can then incorporate. And likewise, you know, we mentioned earlier having the program officer pre-review it if they're willing. That would give you time to incorporate his or her feedback and suggestions. This is very, very helpful. So moving on, best practice number 6, don't leave them guessing. Make sure that your proposal is logical. It's reasonable to expect the desired results based on the proposed activities. So if you took a logic course in college, you know what I mean by logical. But sometimes we have a lot of assumptions and don't present things in a logical manner, but make sure that your proposal is logical. Look at your proposal with critical eyes. Make sure it's complete. There are no gaps or assumptions that are not supported. And when we talk about support, you know, depending on the program or the organization, there's different ways that you can support it. Everything that you can validate just strengthens your case. Don't leave them asking why. So best practice, the next one is to take a hard look at the logic behind your proposal. Here's a little logic table, and you see their inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impact. And I'm not going to go in depth on this because of time restraints, but if you look at the inputs area, you'll see their grant dollars. So that's the investment that funder is going to make in your project or in your organization. And then in the very far right, the impact. The impact you will create should align closely with the granting organization's funding priorities. So they're going to put the money in that allows you to do the activities that you're proposing, which will create a certain number or types of outputs and outcomes, and ultimately that impact. So make sure that the impact aligns with the funding priorities, and that there's a logical sequence between the money that's invested, the activities, the outputs, the outcomes, and the ultimate impact. The funder needs to be convinced that their investment will result in an outcome that aligns with their priorities. The narrative should be logical and well supported. You need to show the alignment in your narrative, and the budget as well with that. So I'm going to check the time here. Okay, we're doing all right. I'm just briefly going to touch on major narrative sections. Typical sections would be organization information, purpose of the grant, and evaluation. And within each of these, there's several subsets. So I'm just going to very quickly move through this when we're talking about creating a dream proposal. The organizational information. This is your chance to convince the funder that your organization is credible. So you're going to include your history, your mission and goals, current programs or activities, strengths or accomplishments, relationship to other organizations with similar missions. They're going to want to know that they're not throwing their money away because somebody else is already doing it and doing it better. So you need to show if someone else is doing something similar kind of in your space, how you are complementing them, and how you're not duplicating, but you're complementing. So that's what you need to show there. Number of board members, staff, and volunteers. So these are some of the organizational things that you would talk about. Purpose of the grant. If it's a general operating grant, you're going to talk about the opportunity, challenges, issues, or needs of your organization. The overall goal of your organization for the funding period. Objectives or ways in which you'll meet the goals, activities and who will carry them out, time frame, long-term funding strategies, and any other information that they require. So this is if the grant is for general operating. Now if it's for a project or other types, then you're going to talk about the situation, opportunities, challenges, issues, need, community, your proposal addresses relating to the project, how the focus was determined. They really don't want to hear or have a feeling that somebody sitting in an office somewhere dreamed this up without any relationship to the community that they're serving. So you're going to want to show how the community that you're serving really has identified this as a need. So tying that loop is important. Activities, the goal for the situation to be addressed, the objectives, activities, and who will carry them out, time frame, how the activities will benefit the community, what impact do you expect, and then long-term funding strategies, if applicable, for sustaining the effort. The third large part of the proposal is evaluation, and more evaluation is important. I'm seeing more of an emphasis on this throughout, even with private funders. Including evaluation plans with every project is important. If you can measure success, you're more likely to attract funding in the future. So to the extent you're able to document and record and measure that success, you will build more success, able to attract more funding in the future. So in terms of evaluation, describe your criteria for success. Simply put, what do you want to happen as a result of your activities? And then how will you measure the changes? Who will be involved in evaluating the work? Are you going to do it with staff? Are you going to have board members? Are you going to contract a consultant? Who will be doing it? And then what will you do with your evaluation results? Certainly you're going to want to share and state that you will share those results with the funding agency. Will you share your lessons learned with others? Is this something that's going to have statewide implications because it's going to help other people in the state? Is it going to have national impact because it will establish best practices within that realm that will inform other organizations' efforts and help others to be effective? Those are things that a funder is interested in knowing, because it means that they're impacting only your discrete project, but they're actually having potential of statewide or national impact. Creating a dream proposal. Budget. We're just going to go pretty brief here. Make sure that your costs are reasonable. Pay attention to what they will or will not fund. Certain costs are eligible, some are not. Match. If match is required or desired, show where the match will come from. This is pretty important, and it's tough in the beginning. So say somebody's, you've got a $100,000 project and a 1-to-1 match is required. So you can request $50,000 for this particular grant. You need to show where the other $50,000 is going to come from. Even if you don't have it in hand, you need to show that you're going to request a grant, or it's pending or in process from another organization, or you're going to raise it in contributions from a specific donor group, or you're going to have some fee-based income. However you're going to do it, you need to show that it will be part of that match and that you have a plan for doing that. A funder really needs to know that with their contribution, this project will succeed. So in other words, if it's a $100,000 project and they're going to give you $50,000 and you never are able to raise that other $50,000, what's going to happen? It's probably going to fail because you're not able to do it properly. So they want to know that this project. Try to answer questions before they're raised, and this isn't only for budget, it would be for the narrative as well, for the budget. Provide an explanation for budget amounts. So for example, if you're conducting a workshop and you're going to provide meals, instead of just saying, it's going to be, $5,000 for these workshops, put in the explanation, meals for workshops, 36 per attendee per day, 3 days, so they can see, how the amount was derived. And I think this is our last best practice here. And I really like this little graphic. We've got the little hiker on the left side, and I think these are Alps. They look like Alps to me, little mountains. And then we've got the mountain goat at the finish line. And I often liken the process of writing a grant, particularly a federal one, because they're a lot of work, to climbing a mountain. When you're standing at the bottom looking up, it seems insurmountable, but you take it a hill at a time, and you will reach the finish line. It's a lot of work, but perseverance is important. You need to hang in there, and you need to persist. In terms of perseverance, if your application is not funded, and I will say you do need to take a long-term approach to developing grant funding. Don't give up if you've applied and you're declined. You can learn from your experience of not being funded a lot, and so try to learn from that. If your application is scored, and a lot of the government grants will be scored, pay attention to any deficiencies and strengthen them the next time around. And sometimes it's that second, maybe even the third time that you become successful. If it's not scored and you just receive verbal feedback or written feedback, pay attention to any feedback you receive. Note it, hang on to it. That's very, very important for you to improve your chances the next time around. Another thing is look at projects that were funded. So maybe yours wasn't, but what was funded? And if possible, learn from them. Federal grant proposals that were funded are public information. So if you want to see an example of a funded proposal, you should be able to get that. So you can check the federal agency website. Copies may be posted there. You can call the program officer in charge of the grant program and ask for a copy of the top-ranked proposal in the last competition. You can ask your congressman to get a copy for you, or if you know someone who received a grant last year, they may be willing to share. Also, you can use the Freedom of Information Act to request copies. Start with the federal program contact and Google instructions for the process. Last but not least, quickly, style and format. Every organization is different, but if you are allowed to create, attach, submit your own document, use built-in formatting to break up dense text and increase ease of reading. Use headings, bold, contrasting color, whatever, bulleted lists, graphics, tables, bold or italicized font, emphasize words or phrases. People are going to be reading this, so make it easy to read to the extent that you can. If you are required to use an online form, use plain text. Be careful with use of adjectives and adverbs, especially with federal proposals. They can be very subjective, you know, and if you're saying this is a fantastic project, it's beautiful, it's going to, it will, you know, if you use those adjectives and adverbs too much, it becomes unbelievable. So just use them very tastefully and carefully. And when pages or characters are limited, start by writing everything you want to say without any concern for length. Just let it, you know, get it all down, then edit to fit the limitations. So again, starting with all of that raw material and all of the everything, and then boil it down from there. So that is the presentation in a nutshell. Again, pretty quick. We weren't able to get into a lot of detail, but if you have any questions, we certainly can address those.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Wow, that was a lot of information. Just excellent information. You spoke to so many details in the process where decisions get made that I think looked by people writing grants. So thank you so much for that. Anybody, there are a couple questions, but if just any other further questions, people can feel free to type them in on the control panel on the side. We will ask them. The first one was you mentioned earlier on that it's important to work with other people and not to try to write this grant alone. In some cases, especially in smaller economic development organizations, there might not be other people to work with on securing a grant. And so I imagine in that sense they might work with a consultant such as you, or finding a third party to be able to review the grant. Could you talk a little bit about how a group might engage a consultant to get support on their grants?
Sure. I think you might want to ask who, you know, if somebody has received a grant, find out who they used. If they used a consultant, you might want to say, who did you use to help you with it? And that might be informative. You can certainly, you know, search online, but I guess I would go with if you're going to contract somebody to work with you, I would go with somebody that's got a good track record of securing grants, and you should be able to find that without too much trouble. But even beyond just contracting with somebody, I would encourage you to, you know, work with, you know, a board member or somebody that can help in the project design, because you'd be surprised how much better your project can become through the brainstorming process and not working in isolation.
Excellent. Another question came in. What was the free website for searching foundation grants that you suggested?
Foundation Center online, or Foundation, it's FDO. Well, it's on the presentation, so I can go back here.
Okay, sounds good. While you're going back to that slide, another question came in. The question says, our organization is a 501c6. Do you need to be a C3 organization to get most grants?
Well, the 501c3 is common. You will just have to look at the guidelines for every grant and see if you are an eligible organization. So it would be just on a organization by organization basis. If you find that you are prohibited from a lot of the grants that you need to that you'd like to go after, you might consider changing your structure, but it would probably vary from funder to funder.
Okay, thank you. Another question, from your experience, can you give some examples of different types of actually, can you give it, excuse me, let me ask you again, from your own examples, can you give some ideas of how economic development groups have used grants, what they have gotten grants for to fund, that you've worked with?
Okay, there's a lot of different things. A lot of times, a lot of them are more project-based, so it might be to provide technical assistance to businesses to be more successful. That would be one. And USDA, rural development, of course I'm in a rural area, so they've had various programs. Rural Business Opportunity Grant, that's one. Rural Business Enterprise Grant, that's another one. But that's really providing technical assistance to businesses. The Economic Development Administration provides grants for infrastructure for public works, including industrial parks. So if your community needs space or developed to be build ready for industry to come, that would be another example. They also provide funding, they used to, I haven't looked lately, but for business incubators. So that might even be to build an incubator and get it going. So those would be a few examples. Certainly there's many others, but.
Sure, sounds good. I know that we've worked with our clients that have received grants in the past for marketing and outreach and promotion of their communities.
Yep.
Do you have any recommendations on where some of our clients might be able to go find that nature of funding, those types of grants?
I guess, you know, I would look at your state, and I would look at your county websites and try to get as familiar as possible with the funding they have. If you are in a geography, you know, a community or a county region, some of those funding sources that are devoted to that region or that community or, you know, the state, they may have funding for economic development in that area. So, for instance, I'm in Northwest Minnesota. Worked with a group here a few years, and they got a grant from the state of Minnesota to do a regional economic development strategy deployment. So they came up with a project for Northwest Minnesota, and they were funded through the state. Sometimes there's some state tourism dollars, so that might also come into play. Sometimes some of the private foundations that are within a region also might have interest in the success of the local or regional economy. So if you can, you know, if you can show the fit with your project and how it's going to benefit the local and regional economy, how it's going to provide quality of life, quality of place for families to live and work in that area, they may be interested in funding it. So again, it's just finding, you know, those organizations with, you know, who cares about this issue? Who cares about this issue? So, you know, as you think about that, you probably will find that there are people that do, and organizations that do care about the marketing of a community. So it's kind of a general answer, but you just kind of have to search it out. And then it's showing the case, so to speak, the logic behind why it's important to market the community and create that place branding and the quality of life so that people can live and work there and the economy can be successful.
Okay, well, thank you, Michelle. That was just excellent information. What a great presentation. There aren't any other questions right now, so if anybody has any further questions, they can feel free to type it in quickly. Other than that, yeah, if you can flip back to your contact information. Michelle comes highly recommended by Golden Shovel Agency. Feel free to contact her directly, or feel free to contact us if you'd like to reach her. And just want to say thank you, and then to you, Michelle, and thank you to all the attendees that joined us today on the expert webinar series, and keep your ears out and email boxes open for the webinar series next month. Do you have any closing thoughts, Michelle?
Just, you know, the whole thing about persistence, just, you know, you have to go into this with an optimistic mindset and keep on, and you will be successful. If, you know, you will kind of learn as you go, but you can be successful if you hang in there.
That's great. Thank you so much, and thank you, everybody. Look forward to seeing you again next month.
Thanks, Aaron.